This is a short summary of Pathwork Lecture 48, The Life Force in the Universe, Week 3, where we're looking at two kinds of pain, degenerating and regenerating. Why two kinds? Because there's on the way down and on the way up. And the guide analogizes this to illness, where you start to get sick and then you go through the healing process, and emphasizes that the healing process can feel more acute. It may even take longer. And I analogize this somewhat simplistically to you can take a wrecking ball and knock a building down fairly fast. Rebuilding the building, regenerating, reconstructing the building can take years. As part of that, we may be making different decisions. We may be dealing with a different structure. So in other words, you built something in the old days, you tear it down, now you build it in the new days, and the rules are different. The needs are different. So the guide says regenerating can feel more acute. It's slower, it's harder. There's more deliberate effort. Now, he's mostly referring to soul work rather than healing work, but I imagine that the body kind of sighs and says, well, we killed off that batch of cells, now we have to build a bunch of new ones. That there's some similarity even in the physical process, just of replacing cells that were damaged. So again, I go with building, and as we rebuild, we integrate not only the new situation, but new ideas. I'm not 3 anymore. I'm not 30 anymore. Not 60 anymore. So I'm building for today, but what got torn down may have been included a lot of leftovers. Ethics, morals, thoughts, processes. So it takes more awareness. It's slower, it's harder, it takes longer, and there's some trial and effort. In a previous in a previous lecture, the guide spoke of groping. He says the process is about groping. You've got to go into the unknown, try it, and say that doesn't work, and then go back into the unknown. And this is the process of regenerating. It can be creative and fun. It's just a lot of hard work. So I think the idea here is to emphasize this is not a slam dunk. It's hard. You can tear it down quickly, but the rebuilding process requires your full attention. It requires a great deal of consciousness to improve, to get what you want, rather than simply replacing the old. And very often when something is missing from our lives, we simply replace it with what we had. And to some extent, maybe we're losing an opportunity there. I'm thinking in terms of downsizing and simplifying, which I'm working on. And sometimes you get rid of things that you are sorry you got rid of. But that's also a learning process. That's also an opportunity to consider what you were thinking when you got rid of it, what you were downplaying, what you weren't looking at. I remember years and years ago, my brother gave me 2 very small gift books, Peanuts, Snoopy books. They were just little kid-sized books. And he wrote an inscription in them. It was so sweet. And when I made a major change to my life, I gave them away. I'm so sorry. I can't tell you what was in my head, except I hadn't looked at them for a long time. And I have missed them ever since. That was, many decades ago. And what I had to learn was that those 2 small books are more in my mind now than they were when they were on my bookshelf. So I didn't really lose them. I actually gained them. I remember them. I think about them. So technical loss is not what we're speaking of here. We're speaking of our soul and learning about ourselves and growing and learning to appreciate and understand what matters. And that does not require thingies, devices, material things. So soul work is advanced, and that's what you're doing if you're reading Pathwork lectures. You're doing soul work. And the guide recommends that you watch out about being distracted by symptoms. Now, this is hard. My two favorite lectures on symptoms are Pathwork Lecture 196, Commitment, Cause, and Effect. And symptoms mean that we're chasing the effects and we're not looking for the cause. Effects jump and shout and make a lot of noise. And if you get rid of them, they just show up someplace else. The other lecture I just recently reviewed in the monthly topic cycle was Pathwork Lecture 121 on distraction, is how pleasurable distractions are. They feel that they relieve the tension, which they do. They're not bad, but we wind up spending all our time on the distractions instead of saying, I got my relief, now let's go back to work. What did we need relief from? Going back and continuing to do the work on the cause. And the third section that I want to cover, that I did in the newsletter and the study guide, is images. Now, images is a huge topic in Pathwork. I counted them up, and in the actual title of the lectures, there's 11 lectures that have image in the title, much less mention it in the body. I didn't look at the Pathwork word search site, which I highlight on my website. It's very handy for research. I should have, and gotten the number of times images is actually mentioned, probably a lot. So because it mentions images, I took the opportunity. Now, at this point, I'm halfway through the lecture, and I realize I can't do this lecture in 1 month. So there's going to be a second month of study guide videos, because the number of exercises and the number of opportunities to illustrate Pathwork concepts was so rich that I couldn't resist it. So I didn't spend that much time on images, but I did want to take this section and go over what they were. So I'm going to review them basically right now. So as a reminder, there's going to be a second month of study guide and so forth. And then because of the topic cycle matching the calendar and the holidays, there'll be a week 5. So it's a lot of time here to peruse, to think, to review the materials, if you like. Images. Images are shortcuts. It's how the mind gets through the day. I can't wake up in the morning and look at the ceiling and say, what is that? I need to know what the ceiling is. I need to understand as I glance around what my environment is. All of you who have moved or been on vacation or had for some reason going from place to place overnight in a sequence, it's a little shocking to wake up and try to figure out where everything is. So the image is a shortcut. I got it. I'm in my bedroom. I got it. I'm in my sister-in-law's bedroom or guest room, etc. So images are handy. They're not inherently bad. Nothing is inherently bad. However, spiritually, when we use an image because of an experience, it's partly a decision. I know what this is because I had that experience. That can be useful if it was based on truth. If it was based on something basic instead of an aberration, instead of one particular person's bad day. So when we start creating images based on experience, human beings are so creative, then we collect them and then we come up with a generalized conclusion. And if that's based on something that's not true, then we're off and running. We now see something and say, I know what that is. And we don't think it through. It's laziness to some extent. It's convenient to some extent. And it's misleading to many extents, depending on how we came up with that generalized conclusion. So the other aspect here that I think Pathwork goes into more than other spiritual studies, in my opinion, is that we don't come in as a blank slate. We come in as a soul wanting to learn something in particular. We come in with a task. We come in knowing there's an aspect of us that isn't working right, and we want to address it, but it's not working right because we're attached to something that's not true. We come in with some fundamental untruths or false beliefs. And these act out in our consciousness, in our unconscious and our consciousness, and these help build these images. That's why images is a big deal in Pathwork, because coming in with a false belief is a big deal in Pathwork. It's the premise of why we're here. So here's some examples. I am not enough. Now, that sounds common. I know it's universal, but there's always a particular spin on it. So when I speak platitudes, I know that I'm just speaking like a generalized category of I am not enough. But a lot of people respond to the idea, I am not enough. They respond, but they're not necessarily willing to admit it. And this is the problem with untruths. They hurt. Untruth hurts. The fact that I'm not enough is wrong. I know it's wrong. I know it's unfair and unjust. It makes God wrong. It makes the world wrong. It's not fair. It's not right. Something's terribly wrong, but I believe it. When that isn't verbalized, when that's repressed and kept down because we're afraid to hear it, it still colors other things in our lives. So I am enough. No, I am not enough makes us hesitate. Why should I volunteer my ideas? It's not going to be enough. Why would I reach out to you? I won't be enough. And it hurts to see your reaction. Well, what do you mean, your reaction? Well, I know what that reaction looks like and feels like because it happened with my mother, with my father, you see, these are the experiences we had. And you can see where if you back it up, I am behaving this way today because I felt pain and sorrow and distress as a child, which is where the cauldron where we make up all these images. The trick is I was afraid I wasn't enough before I was even born. So I created a life that shoved that in my face until, and this is the magic part, I learned to outgrow it. I learned to challenge it. I learned to say, wait a minute, that can't be a universal truth. It may be my experience, but it may not be universal, and to work it out, which is what I do in my own work with the Pathwork lectures. So that's about I am not enough. Another one would be something we've studied a lot about, and also in this lecture, authority only seeks power and control. That may be true in many instances. There's a tendency once you take authority to enjoy the exercise of your power and control. This is part of enjoying your life force. It's pleasurable. But when you only extend it in one direction, you become tied to it. It becomes habitual. And you develop systems and ways of doing things that you stay locked in, because if that's pleasurable, then everything else is unpleasurable, which is part of the duality that we study a lot. You can see why this lecture just kept pinging on different Pathwork concepts for me. So authority may only seek, that may be the human reality, but our image extends that back to divine law. It extends it back to God, because there's, for instance, in the many lectures, there's a God image and a Father image about this all started in heaven, and therefore we're just replicating what that is. Instead of seeing that heavenly authority was something that we weren't quite ready to grasp or understand or surrender to and accept the divine truth of. So we've come here to act it out and to see it done badly until we protest. Does it have to be done badly? Or can it be done well? Is the concept useful and we just misuse it? And the last one I'll mention is arguing never works. Well, that's an easy one, because if you're in a family of will types, which was my background, you're not going to win an argument unless you're like them or you fight hard. Or my brother, for instance, was very erudite and he could marshal his thoughts. And I couldn't. I got tongue-tied. I never learned to verbalize my feelings and thoughts. They were confusing to me, and they didn't match my parents. I didn't get any support for that in the subtle ways. So arguing never works, so I just give in. Well, if I give in, I don't learn to verbalize. I don't get the practice. Now, I'm a big fan of Malcolm Gladwell's perhaps overly uh, dismissive, generous, um, overly generalized conclusion that if you want to become good at something, you have to spend 10,000 hours. I'm a fan of it because everything I do really, really well, and I have a set of skills, I've spent at least 10,000 hours doing. Now, the pleasure comes from not having drudged through those 10,000 hours. And sometimes you just have that experience without counting the hours, and you wind up with the skill, which is far more pleasurable. Um, but this goes back to it takes work. Verbalizing my feelings has taken work. I had to start from scratch, and that helps. It helped when I became humble and aware that I had no skills, and I had to build them. And as I built them, this was the regeneration work where I had to try and fail and try and fail. I would verbalize something and it would sit around for a while. And then I'd say, no, that's not quite it. I'd have to basically take it back and try again. And some people got tired of that. Can't you make up your mind? We would like to rely on you. Well, if you rely on what I said a month ago, you're not relying on the truth. So that doesn't really help you, and it doesn't help me. But that's what I allowed as a child. It was too hard to try to continually generate what I was thinking and feeling, so I allowed people's impressions to rule my life. So that arguing never worked. I just stopped arguing. And so I stopped verbalizing. And to some extent, I stopped the generative process inside. And that's the danger of images. My experience convinced me it wasn't worth it. It was painful. It's an excuse. It's lazy. Uh, and so you need some maturity to go back over these things and look at them and say, well, that needs repair work. That needs to be done. Whether it's good, bad, pleasant, unpleasant, has to be done. There's a lot of that in this lecture. I really invite you to listen to Gary Volbrock's wonderful recordings of this, to read the lecture, read the study guide, whatever, and take a look at Pathwork Lecture 48 on the life force in the universe. And thanks for listening.